us for this new episode of I'll Allow It Nevada, the ultimate podcast for quick insights into Nevada's judicial education. I'm Anne-Marie Mayu, your host, and joining me as co-host is Seth Easley. Welcome,
Hello,
Seth.
Everyone.
We proudly represent the Supreme Court of Nevada Administrative Office of the Court's Judicial Branch Training. And in this episode, we will be delving into case management systems. It is with great delight that we welcome our respected guest, Amber Putz, Administrative Office of the Court's IT Manager. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Amber.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So let's talk about, just kind of give us an overview of what an actual case management system is within the Nevada courts. Because, the public hear this. We put this out to the public. So we kind of want to let them know what we're talking about. And we will refer to it as a CMS.
Yes, a CMS.
Okay.
So within the state, we have 15 or so different CMSs. And what that is where the courts enter all of their cases. So let's say you get a traffic ticket, or you need to apply for any kind of civil matters, small claims, evictions, anything like that. That is where the court enters the data and enters all the documents, hearings, anything like that, and can track your cases.
So do all Nevada courts have a CMS?
Yes, of some sort.
Okay.
But, obviously we used to have a lot of paper files. Some of our courts still keep paper files, but there is a lot more that are going to electronic means. So a lot more dependence on these CMSs.
Okay. Great. And are they all the same system?
No. So as I said, we do have about 15 different ones in the state.
Oh, wow.
We are a non-unified state, so each court can choose to have their own. We here at the Supreme Court, within the AOC, we do offer a state-sponsored CMS. So we do have about 30 plus courts that do utilize that system. A CMS is pricey. A lot of our courts are rural, very small. They may not have the ability to purchase a CMS on their own. So we do offer one out to any court in the state that wants to utilize our system.
Oh, okay. That's nice. So as the courts implement a new case system into the system, do you know kind of how that process has evolved over the years in Nevada?
So exciting. I'm actually starting a new CMS implementation. We are upgrading our current one. It's staying with the same vendor, but it is going to a newer product.
Nice.
So we're actually doing an implementation currently. First steps that we've started with was a business process review. And the company comes in, we meet with some of our fellow courts that use it, and we basically go through everything in that system that we use and don't use. And maybe some of it was we never implemented it because at the time we weren't needing that, or, it just didn't fit what was going on. And unfortunately, what we have found out is there's a lot of items in the CMSs that we're not utilizing. And of course, as technology changes, we're seeing the need for that. So trying to now bring that back in is a bit of a struggle. So we're going through and reviewing everything as a first step to see, okay, what do we need? What do we have that we should have been using? And what are we absolutely missing?
Right.
Like I said, we have courts that attend these and just talk about what their needs are. So that's the first step. I will say, I think that it has changed. Obviously, our technical needs have evolved quite a bit.
Sure.
And with being a non-unified state, each of our courts, they have different needs. We service everything from urban areas to very rural locations. And so those needs for your rural courts are really going to vary from your urban locations. So it's really checking in with each court and figuring out what does that court need to do their day-to-day jobs.
So can you name one major difference between a rural and an urban court, one major need difference?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously volume is going to be really different in your urban versus your rural.
Okay.
But you have these rules that deal with a tremendous amount of, say, tickets. If they're on a major highway going through the state, they may deal with a very high volume of tickets with a very small staff.
Oh.
So they have to be able to handle those very quickly. The other things you see, especially with our rural courts, is, of course, with travel, you may have people that get a ticket or some kind of criminal case in a very rural part of the state, but maybe they live, 2 states over, or they live at the opposite end of the state. So one of the big pushes that we've seen more recently, and especially was brought on by COVID, was the ability to do things either online or remotely.
Okay.
So virtual hearings are on the rise and very different. You know, your urban courts may be able to implement something like rural hearings very easily. They have a lot of technology. They have staff to be able to implement that. But your rural courts may not have that IT staff or court staff to really manage that. So how do we make it easy for them?
Well, and the technology is just going to keep changing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those things that you almost have to be, on your toes for all the time. What are the primary components or features of a case management system that are particularly crucial for the Nevada courts?
Obviously, we have to make sure that any system we use is mass compliant, and that's our minimum accounting standards. So that goes along with our audit department, making sure that we are meeting those standards placed by audit.
Okay.
The other just high level one we have to make sure that we are compliant with is our statistics. So we report all kinds of stats out from our courts to our statistical department. So making sure the system can obtain those stats in an easy way for the court to enter them and an easy way for stats to receive them as needed. So obviously that's, at the highest level. And then, of course, making sure that the courts, that's easy for them. It's not too difficult to train. It's easy to use. It can be quick. Some of our courts may handle 40, 50 cases in a couple hours. So they need that ability to enter all of that data very quickly and efficiently. So at the end of that hearing or that trial, when they produce those orders by the judge, that it contains everything.
Right.
So also making sure we're compliant with the laws, making sure that they have all the necessary dockets and events and hearing types to be able to comply with different laws. We recently went through a big law change with the passing of AB 116.
That was a big one.
That was a big one.
Yeah. Can we talk real quick about what AB 116 was?
Yes. So prior to the passing of AB 116, all tickets in Nevada, so traffic tickets, were misdemeanors. So even if you got a speeding ticket or, maybe you failed to stop at a stop sign, it was considered a misdemeanor.
Right.
So they passed AB 116 at the beginning, or it went effective beginning of 2023. And what it did was it took what they call basic traffic. So speeding tickets, not signaling lane change, fail to stop at stop signs, to name a few.
Right.
They made those civil infractions. So they're no longer misdemeanors counting against you.
Okay.
So now they're a civil matter. And so it was a huge overhaul. And unfortunately, there's so much to it. It really affected every area in the case management systems, in the courts. It had to change case types. You had to change degrees of laws. I mean, we have thousands of laws that changed. It also changed fee codes. So what might have been $100 in one court's now $150.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, with some of these laws that get passed, there's always instructions that we have to try to figure out.
Sure.
It's recreating process and procedures. How do we hold a hearing now? Who's involved in a hearing? Who's liable? Who's responsible for summonsing people? Where's law enforcement's involvement? With them being civil infractions now, the district attorney or civil attorneys, your prosecuting attorneys aren't required to be involved anymore.
Right.
Law enforcement, who's subpoenaing them? Is it on the courts? Is it on the person? I mean, the whole law changed, and the whole process of how the courts handle it has completely changed now.
Right.
So we basically had to start over with the system, and we actually rolled out a new CMS at the beginning of last year just to handle civil traffic. We did offer it statewide. We have hit some bumps in the roads with it, continuing to work on that. And at the same time, we're trying to upgrade our current system to that new system that would be able to handle everything.
Well, and working in the judiciary, you do see different legislature, come out, different things being changed. And it's okay to change, certainly. But when you really start picking it apart, there's a lot to that onion, right? There's there's a lot of different levels to that, and a lot of different things that you need to really focus on to get that accomplished as you're being required to.
So much of the unknown with that one that there was so much unknown on what it was going to look like on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think we're still working through it. I know that this past legislature, there was some bills submitted to, I guess they used the word cleanup, but to maybe clarify some of the points or to make sure, the legislation's intent was known so that the courts can interpret it that way.
Right. Yeah, that was a tough one. And you hear comments of that all the way from, the level of the judge to court administrators to clerks. And it's been a big one. I'm sure there's some benefits to it.
I think you see a lot of benefits for people who may receive tickets. I mean, if you've ever applied for a job and you had to go through a background check, technically misdemeanors could be checked. So could the fact that you got a traffic ticket count against you in a negative way on a background check? It potentially could.
Right.
So I do think you're going to see some benefits from that. The other thing that was pretty common was warrants being issued on traffic tickets. So maybe you forgot to pay it or you didn't have the money and you didn't make contact with the court.
Right.
And it went to warrant. So you'd have people arrested on warrants for, fail to pay or fail to appear when there was mechanisms to take care of them, but maybe, for one reason or another, it didn't get handled. So with the passing of the civil infractions, they are no longer go to warrant. So, I mean, there's pros and cons with that too, of course.
Sure.
It just depends on, what side of it you're looking at. But that did change that. There was lots of driver's license suspensions from, fail to appears or fail to pays. With civil infractions, they did change that a little bit.
Okay.
There still may be suspensions, but there's a process now to get to that point. So people may have had their license rights restored or different things, or they may be suspended for failure to pay or appear now. So there's ramifications still.
Sure.
But they are very different from what they were when they were misdemeanors.
Well, that would make sense because it's taken it kind of down a level.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Down a degree.
Down a degree. That's a better way to say that. So that was fun going into AB 116. So how do the CMS systems facilitate case tracking?
So there's a couple things we're working on there. I mean, obviously we have different case types. So when you enter a case, they have a case type.
Right.
And then we try to collect stats for numbers. So time to disposition is something we check. So how long from a case initiation to that point where someone is adjudicated, so whether it be guilty, dismissed, deferred, anything like that, how long is that time? So we do track those type of items. How long does it take potentially to get to your hearing? We have to be able to track, of course, we have laws for some of the case types where you have to have hearings at certain intervals.
Right.
So maybe it's a 48-hour bail hearing or a 72-hour probable cause hearing. Preliminary hearings you have to have within 15 days unless there's waivers. So being able to set up what we call as ticklers, but basically they're reminders in the system that, this has to happen or, this is due on these days. Having that system be able to track those is really important. The other thing we would like to start, we don't have in our current case management system, but we will in the new one, is document management. So if you have a motion you need to track, being able to attach it to the case so you can see it. You don't have to pull that paper file. Being able to track those, like motion tracking. With motions, there's certain days each party has to reply.
Right.
So being able to enter that motion in the system and have those days populate will be something in the new system.
Yeah.
So a clerk doesn't have to write a Post-it note on the front of that file, check on motion in X amount of days.
Right.
So
it comes up on their system.
Yeah, but they'll have a dashboard and different things where these little reminders will come up.
That's really good. We're going to stop real quick. While we pause for a brief commercial break, I'd like to make a request to our audience. All Allow It Nevada is not exclusively a certified legal education podcast. It's designed to be inclusive for everyone. Our aim is to connect with communities and provide insightful perspective on the Nevada judiciary. If you find these episodes enjoyable, kindly share the experience with your friends and family. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you. What about, do they facilitate any kind of communication amongst the judges?
So right now, unfortunately, they do not.
Okay.
I wish we had more of that ability.
Mm-hmm.
We do have some ability with judges in the same court. So if you have, your court has 2, 3, 4 judges, you can assign things. You can, have a different judge cover your stuff. You can send over cases, orders, different things like that, and share them.
Okay.
But unfortunately, our CMSs currently do not talk to each other. So like I said, we do have about 15 in the state. They do not communicate to each other. So your judges here, let's say in Carson City, do not know what, a defendant may have a case in, say, Elko. They're not going to know about that.
Okay.
We are working outside the CMS. We are working on a data repository with IT and our statistical department that will collect data from all courts, but it will collect data from all courts, but how that's going to be presented is still in the works.
Okay.
But they will be able to collect more stats statewide and hopefully have them more universal so that if you have, say, some sort of case, like a DUI case here, it is the same as a DUI case in Elko or Las Vegas, or, you're out in you're in Ely.
Right. Now, if you're on the same CMS system, though, you're going to be able to see, like, if Carson was on the same system as Fernley.
A bit more in the sense you can see alerts and different types of things connected to a person.
Okay.
A court's cases are still their cases. So generally, we don't share across the different courts. However, with new systems, there is ability to publish cases online. Most cases are public record. Obviously, there's exceptions, juvenile and different things like that.
Right.
But with newer case management systems, there is that ability to publish those cases online where you could go either as the public or as a fellow agency and search people, search cases, different things like that. So right now, we are lacking that ability, but would like to have that to offer, and then courts could choose to publish their cases or not.
Okay. So it sounds like there is going to be, with the 30, you said that we're going to jump on board with this new case system. There is going to be ability to see a little bit of information in between. And I'm just curious. I don't know if you have the answer to this, but what about other states' information?
So same. And of course, this will be a court configuration. So one court may choose to publish, X cases where the other court may say, no, we don't want to publish those.
Oh, okay.
So there will be some configuration there, of course.
Sure.
But with publishing them online, it's public record, so anyone could access it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So how seamlessly do the case management systems integrate with the existing court processes and technologies in Nevada?
Unfortunately, right now, the system that we have, and of course, this is one of the reasons we are looking to upgrade, ours does not integrate very well. It's an on-premise server. It's a little bit older technology. So integrations are a bit more, we can do them. We do have quite a few. We are working on that. It's just a little bit more involved than it would be with, say, a web-based application, which is what we'd be looking at with the new CMS.
Okay.
We do have integrations. So, for example, one of the biggest integrations we have is with law enforcement. So, for the most part, if someone receives a ticket in the state, that agency has a ticket writing handheld machine. So they write your ticket, they print it out, they give you your ticket right there, in your car. Then that electronically comes in to our courts. So if it's one of the state-sponsored CMS, or if you utilize our product called McGuiges, Multi-County Integrated Justice Information System.
Woohoo!
I know, very, very long and hard to remember. Those tickets come right into your case management system electronically.
Okay.
So that gets rid of the need for the clerk to have to manually enter that ticket. So those tickets come in electronically. Obviously, that's a huge amount of manual labor.
Yes.
Especially on your courts. We have courts receiving, thousands a month.
Wow.
So those come in electronically. Of course, there's always some bumps in the road there. If something's missing, it may not come in, or different things like that. But for the most part, about 90% of the tickets come in electronically, right into the case management system. Then the clerks can do their transaction on it. So say the person just pays, or maybe they have a hearing. And then once it's completed, if they are found guilty or found to have committed the civil infraction, that gets reported then to the DMV if applicable. So if that, let's say speeding, carries points.
Sure.
So if there is points associated with it, then electronically we have an integration with the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Okay.
So that goes electronically to the DMV, which reduces the DMV's need to have to manually enter those points on someone's driving record.
Everyone wins.
Everyone wins. So this past year, we embarked on a big project to expand that. Okay. Not all of our courts were taking advantage of it. And DMV had a pretty significant backlog. So we were able to get all of those courts on electronically. So we send about 92% of our convictions to the DMV electronically.
Wow.
So we communicate with Department of Public Safety.
Okay.
So for criminal history. So if someone is convicted of something that would go on your criminal history.
Sure.
We are working on those going electronically. We do have one court that's working on it right now, and we are working on perfecting that and then bringing on others. Okay. The other integrations we are working on are sending protection orders electronically. Obviously, anytime we can get that information into the state system quicker, it helps, every party involved, with the safety in our communities and such.
Sure.
So those are a couple we have. We also have integrations with some companies that send text and email reminders. So like when you go to the dentist, usually the day before, you get that little reminder, hey, dentist appointment tomorrow at 2.
Right.
We have that for our courts. So it sends you a reminder when a hearing is set on your case. That way you could just click right, especially if you have a smartphone, you can click on it, add an event, puts it right into your calendar. It will also text you or email you the day before and remind you. And it has payment reminder ability. So if you are on a payment plan, it'll remind you a week before, hey, you have X amount of dollars due on the date. And then it'll send you a follow-up if it is missed. So that does help, reduce FTAs and fail to pays, which helps the courts reduce some of that load.
Right. And you mentioned something about payments, or say, for instance, you need to get paid. You're the victim.
Yes.
And you're getting paid. Do we have any kind of a system or capability of putting together some type of like card that instead of mailing a check or doing direct deposit?
So some courts have gone to that where it's like a debit card style.
Right.
So we do have some availability with the payment vendors to do that. Okay. It's usually a configuration with the payment vendor used. We are going to a new payment vendor this year that does have some capability to do that. Other things we're looking at with that is being able to pay easier, like Venmo or PayPal or like Cash App, Zelle, different things where people could pay their ticket easier than having to write a check or get out their debit card. I know a lot of people use Venmo and such nowadays, so you could pay your stuff using that.
That's great.
And then, the different capabilities of receiving your money. So do you have to receive it by a check? Or can they do direct deposit right to your bank? Or like you said, there are some companies that are doing like the debit credit cards now.
Right. Just the easier, the more tools we can give our public, the easier, more access to justice, all that great stuff, right? I
mean, I will tell you, if I go to buy something and I can pay, without having to get my debit card out, I'm more likely to do it.
Sure.
And so same thing, if it's easier to pay or easier to receive money, then I think more people are involved in that process.
Well, I think so too. I think it's just that technology that's changed, and we need to be willing to change with it. So that's great to hear that we've got some courts that are embracing that.
Oh, yeah.
So what measures are in place to ensure accessibility and usability of these systems for the judges and court staff across the different locations in the state? So, I mean, we're challenged a little bit with the system we have with technology. I mean, obviously, we have to make sure they have connections. We have to go through state connections with internet. Yeah. Always, you have to make sure your courthouse may have the proper wiring, different things like that. So we run into some issues, especially with some of our rural courts. They're big, beautiful, but very old courthouses. It's brick. It's built in the early 1900s. It's amazing to look at, but it has very old wiring. And how do we do that? Maybe it's a historical building. So how do you make those upgrades to run these newer systems and different things? So obviously assessing the needs of each courthouse and each court first, making sure that they have what they need. And if not, how can we get them what they need to run? One of the bigger things too, especially going to a web-based systems, court staff, judges, clerks may be able to access things on tablets or smartphones. So maybe something comes in after hours, or you only have a certain amount of time to review certain documents and you've stepped out. You could do it right there from your phone. Yeah. So trying to increase that access for them
Also being able to do laptops so you can go from your desk to the courtroom, or if you have to, maybe we have some courts that hold night court, or they hold a community court where maybe they go to like a community center or the local library to hold court. So being able to take that technology from the courtroom on site and conduct those different courts.
Sure.
So trying to make sure that we have that availability for them to do that, and, making sure all of our apps and different things are mobile able is big. I mean, if someone can't log in and look at their case or pay their ticket because it's not mobilely enabled, I mean, a lot of us don't have desktop computers anymore. Everything's on our smartphone or tablets.
That is true. Yeah, and that is important. It's important to be able to be flexible, I think, when you're talking about, a rural judge and the staff there to be able to meet the needs of that community.
Yeah. One of the things I've recently seen is, especially after COVID, how do you hold jury trials?
Yeah, that's tough.
That was tough. And we had a few courts that actually did them remote. So the jurors were actually at home. They would send them like an iPad or some kind of tablet.
Okay.
With cameras. They could log in. They could answer their questions. They had to be on it, 10 o'clock. And actually were able to hold jury trials and still have that proper distancing. Everybody was safe during that time.
Sure.
So business didn't just stop because, everyone has their right to their trials.
Yes.
So how do you, and yes, we were in a pandemic, but we still have those laws that apply. So
and they have to be timely.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you have the jurors feel safe? They don't, during that time, they didn't want to go out. They didn't want to sit in a packed courtroom. They, and some of these courtrooms may not have space to put people 6 feet away.
Right.
So seeing those different access, being able to give those tablets out and have people appear remotely.
Right.
So there was some real thinking outside the box.
I love that creative stuff, right? Yeah. Give me a problem, let's solve it.
Definitely COVID pushed us into some stuff, some virtual, and different remote hearings, virtual hearings. Digital evidence is going to be a big thing coming up. So we are leaning more towards virtual hearings. Mm. Well, how do you submit your evidence now? You're, 2 states away, but you have this video or you have these pictures. It used to be you had to come to the court. You had to have 3 copies, one for you, one for the other party, one for the court. You had to bring in your paper pictures. Couldn't have it on your phone. So now if you have remote hearings, how do you do that?
Well, and then from a judge's point of view, and we've conducted a few trainings on this for our judges, because this is a very difficult and special skill to have on digital evidence. How do you figure out what's real and what's not? Because
agreed.
There's so many tools out there that can change the real evidence. And so that's a whole other ball of wax, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's scary, but it's super intriguing to see where we're going with that.
And you can't just say, well, we're not dealing with that, because that's just not a choice anymore. This is where we're going, and it's going to continue to change. This is the future. And so we've really got to move with it and find ways to handle that. But I love that. The jury trial virtually. That's...
Yeah. It was innovative and it was just intriguing.
A big thank you to our guest, Amber, and as well as to everyone who's been listening. Before we wrap up, here are a couple of important reminders. For continuing legal education credit, be sure to complete a certificate of attendance and email it to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or comments, we welcome your input. Please email them to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. We value and look forward to hearing from our listeners. Stay tuned for more episodes of I'll Allow It Nevada, released every first and third Friday of the month. This is Seth Beasley signing off. Take care, Nevada.